August 19th, 2021. Commission meeting for the month of August. We are in the midst of a transition. Our administrator for the has left the department, so we are a little behind in some of our postings. And I would ask the commission to please bear with us as we work through. I'm sorry, I'm adding my mic on. As we work through the minutes, the agenda, and the first meeting where our past manager is no longer available. I just realized I didn't have my mic on. Was that first part captured, or should I repeat it for the record? All right, that was a practice. Good morning. My name is David Merriman, and we're going to call to order the Cuyahoga County Equity Commission meeting for the month of March. The time is 10:04. Just acknowledging that this is the first meeting where our past commission manager is no longer with us. She has transitioned, Kati Morales. She provided great service to the county. We miss her dearly, but we are moving forward. I do want to first recognize that we were unfortunately delayed in posting today's agenda. The agenda will be posted. We're going to carry forward with the meeting with the materials that we have in front of us. And would like to, as we've called the meeting together, I'd like to begin with a roll call. Representing the Department of Development, Paul Hertig.
I'm here.
Representing the Office of Human Resources, Jesse Drucker.
Present.
Representing the Office of the Diversity and Inclusion, Lenore Lockett.
Here.
And then representing Justice Service, Lindy Burt.
Here.
As a public meeting, we are required to maintain the use of our masks. So I will ask commission members to please keep your mask on. If anyone comes to speak to the commission, we do have a microphone set up. We'd ask them to do the same. And as challenging as it is, I think this is something that makes sense for us to ensure the safety of our commission and our office. I'd like to begin now by a review and approval of the minutes. The minutes, I believe, were sent around. If you did not have them because of the delay in posting and would like an extra minute, then let's do that. We'll take an extra minute. And when someone is available, I'd like to ask if there's a motion for approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Jesse Drucker. Is there a second?
I will second.
Second by Paul Hertig. Are there any amendments or any changes to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes have been approved. Public comments. Is there anyone here from the public to speak on any matters of the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move to opening remarks from commission members. Once again, I do want to apologize for the delay in having some of the materials posted. This is something we'll resolve moving forward. And I'll open it up if there are any other commission members that would like to share updates or opening remarks from your departments.
Yes. David, I would like to give a brief update, as I do every month, on the status of the Department of Development's request for qualifications for small business assistance services. Our staff have completed the scoring of our RFQ, and we're in the process of notifying the various vendors which have been recommended to negotiate for awards and which have not been. And I fully anticipate by the time this body meets again next month, we will be able to publicly state which are the recommended awards, and they'll be making their way through the approval process to County Council. And again, the focus of this has very much been on supporting organizations that support small minority-owned businesses.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Paul? Any other commission members have updates?
Lindy Burt for Department of Public Safety and Justice Services. I think this is my first meeting here as Alex Pelham transitioned out as of August 13th, so I'm very happy to be participating. Our department, as Alex had updated you, held a series of presentations for all of our staff, educating them on legislation, organizational structure, county activities to date in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That was late spring, early summer. We are now in the process of, similar to Health and Human Services, setting up an employee committee to have a staff group in place to move our department forward in this area. I also wanted to note, unrelated to our department, I saw University of Akron is once again offering its free course. That I don't know the title of it, but are you guys familiar with this course? It was taught by a professor. It was on the history of structural racism in the United States, and unfortunately I saw that the registration for that ended yesterday. Although I don't know if you call, you might still be able to get in, but it's a 12-week course, Wednesday evenings from 5:30 to 6:30. It was an excellent course that they offered last year. And again, free to the public, done virtually. The professor's a law professor. It was excellent. So I don't know if, I saw it mentioned in the media that was coming around again. I'm sorry if I didn't mention it, September 1st it starts, so to bring that to people's
Yeah, if you could
attention.
forward it around to the group, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
I'll send a link and some information. I don't know if you can still get in. Again, I tried the link to register and it was no longer live, but maybe if people were interested and called, perhaps they could still get in.
Sounds good. Questions for Lenny Burt? Any other updates?
Yes, I have update for the Department of Human Resources. So we have formed, as you know, the Human Resources Department was among one of the later departments that were put into the pilot. So we've formed a small committee to start to talk about HR conversations that are planned twice a month within the department on diversity issues. And that's ongoing. Part of the work of that committee is to devise a diversity statement. You know, it's very common that people confuse diversity and and equal employment opportunity affirmative action. So we're currently working on a statement that will distinguish diversity from EEO affirmative action. We've started to talk about the pay equity study that was done a while ago and how we're going to coalesce around that and whether or not we need to focus in on a compensation survey first, a countywide compensation survey first. I'd like to report on the tuition reimbursement program. We had to run it for a bid a second time. That bid is closed as of August 16th. It's been scored, and I'm going to start to have discussions on it this week. We're finished with an initial draft of the program details, and it appears that we are on track to for a January 1 starting date, subject to county council approval
Right.
of funding. So we're well on our way, and I think I think you know my view that will open up doors to people for advancement. So.
I have a question for you, Jesse.
Sure.
On the January 1 start date, would that be that employees could potentially qualify for reimbursement like for spring semester, or that's when you would
For
kick
spring
off for fall semester?
No, my view is there would be a kickoff as of January 1st for spring semester.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
I mean, there are a lot of subject twos in that statement, but we're on track for January 1st.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Lenora?
Thank you. Lenora Lockett, Department of Equity and Inclusion. I have a few updates. As part of the effort to increase our focus on supplier and diversity and in general equity in the county, we did hire 3 new employees. They started in July. Adam Miller is sitting next to me, is one of the contract compliance officers that started July 19th. Then a week later, 2 more started. Patricia Anderson and Jennifer Fuller, so we're happy to have them on board. Also, as part of gearing them up and getting them ready to jump in for the work at hand, they are going to be attending the American Contract Compliance Association's 2021 National Training Institute. It's a week-long training. The classes are audited by Morgan State University. They have 2 certification levels. The contract compliance officer that takes contract CCA that takes 2 years, and the MCA that takes 4 years. A lot of the classes are based on equitable employment and contracting. And as part of that, while there's a lot on supplier diversity, there's the preamble to at least that where it's Title VI training, information on implicit bias, things of that sort that impact how we purchase and contracting and employ and select employees. So I'm excited about that training that they'll be attending in the end of August, the last week of August. Also, we submitted our SBE policy and WBE policy to County Council. The first reading was on August 3rd. We're anticipating 3 readings because it's an ordinance, which means that we know that we want to do training, but we can't do training until those approval and the final forms are in the final state is approved. So we're looking at training at earliest October, but more likely late October, November. and we're doing 2 streams of training. Obviously, we have to train the internal county procurement staff on the changes to the supplier diversity component that works with that, and then also the vendors. So there's going to be the external training for the vendors. And finally, I just wanted to mention that we are excited about the working group and focusing on the working group did recommit the subcommittee for the GARE survey, and part of the agenda in the later phase is that we want to start looking at how do we provide those developing preliminary equity assessment or tools that can be used by departments and all of us as we do our work to look at how we can assess where we are and determine what path.
Great. Other questions for Lenora?
If I may, I forgot to make an introduction.
Okay.
I'd like to introduce to the commission Tonya Suber, who is the new HR Director of Organizational and Employee Development and
Oh.
Training. She's replacing Deborah Johnson. So she's going to be working with us with the rollout of the diversity training.
Wonderful.
This is her 4th day? Fourth day. And she's come back each and every morning.
That's great. Welcome aboard. It's a great place to work. And do also want to acknowledge and thank Lenora Lockett and Adam, who has been helping us today and stepping in, I believe, doing minutes, has helped organize the meeting. I think as we work through the transition of no longer having a dedicated staff person, we're committing to the many hands share the work or lessen the work approach. And I just call for volunteers if there's any other volunteers that want to help out moving forward. We're grateful to have new staff join us in the pandemic in both of these offices to focus on this work. Congratulations for bringing in staff, for having the ability to really focus attention and get this work moving. So for the Department of Health and Human Services, our principal update is this week and next. We are doing Crucial Conversations. This is an ongoing series that Dr. Leon Harris and Sabrina Robert and the Department of Health and Human Services Race, Equity, and Inclusion Committee has led. These conversations occur during the lunchtime. They're happening at 2 different opportunities. And what we're doing is we're trying to normalize conversations about race and equity with our team. We do these remotely, unfortunately, because of the need to continue to ensure folks are safe. We do have staff deployed throughout the county, and so it'd be challenged to find a single location to do this. These are lunchtime conversations intended to be very open and safe spaces for people to talk about difficult issues. They've been very successful. I want to acknowledge Leon, Sabrina, and the committee for doing what I think is great work to keep this a priority, to have each of these conversations be a chance for a staff person to come forward and share, to ask, to talk, and for there to be an environment for folks to learn and to continue to develop. So an acknowledgement and appreciation of them. And in that same vein, I do also want to specifically acknowledge one of our commission members, Paul Hertig, was one of the staff leads for a very exciting event yesterday, working closely with the county's chief of staff, Bill Mason. We did a community town hall in person in the central community yesterday, and it was to me a very long overdue effort to have the county leadership get into communities to begin to talk about our investments in communities. This was not an REI-focused event. This was an event focusing on changing communities that have been disproportionately impacted by social problems such as violence and crime. Paul, can I ask you to put you on the spot to share just a little bit more about the event?
Thanks. First of all, I want to thank everyone that helped. Looking around the table, I think everyone here helped. Lindy was ready to provide a tent. Thank goodness it didn't rain. But very seriously, the executive announced in his State of the County speech that there was going to be an initiative to focus assistance on neighborhoods that had been historically disinvested. And as an example, and first but not only, there's a focus on assistance to the central neighborhood of Cleveland. We were out there last night as one of several events. There was a jobs event held the week before. There'll be other jobs events. Really, the focus last night was engagement, and we're trying to take engagement very seriously. We were hosted by the Burton Bell Carr Development Corporation, which is, in many senses, a representative of the community, along with the elected Cleveland City Council member Dolores Gray, who spoke. And I think it was very important to me that the meeting was held at a place owned by Burton Bell Carr. It was moderated by the director of Burton Bell Carr. The community engagement portion of the meeting was moderated by the director, and that brought forth, I believe, some powerful statements from community members and representatives that needed to be heard and were heard. So it's an example of the kind of thing we will seek to do more of in the way of engaging the community.
Questions for Paul on this? So I just think this was an outstanding event. I attended it, and I felt that this is what we're being called on to do these days. It's no longer develop programs and kick off initiatives and then get feedback after they've been implemented. And I do want to just thank you, Paul, for your leadership on that event, but largely on the Central Surge, because I think we got some feedback yesterday. Some of the ideas that we had for ways that we believed would improve the community weren't universally accepted. And I want to acknowledge that there were county residents that stepped forward with other ideas and some feedback, and that is what we need. And I think opening up those conversations, even if they're uncomfortable at times, is essential to us changing our standing in the community, our ability to address these problems. So congratulations to you, to Bill Mason and Armin Budish. I thought it was a great success, and I look forward to hearing about more of them. So unless there are other updates from commission members, I think we are going to go ahead and we are going to move to the next section of our agenda, which is a discussion of the equity data metrics. There are several items on here. I think we need to start to discuss where our baseline will be, what our ultimate goals will be, and our milestones. So I don't know, Lenora, do you want to kick us off with this discussion?
Okay, thank you. Part of what we do is we want to be able to document where we began or our progress and how we're making progress in those areas. And the first thing, while it doesn't tell all the whole picture, data is a quick synopsis and also a tangible evidence of if we're making progress. I know that as part of the initial equity report, we were looking to leverage some of the data that departments, obviously we're government entities has data, information. So first was trying to look at data that we already have and see how we can disaggregate it based on race and gender so that we could see, are there any disproportionalities or disparities or areas that we can see that we're not having an equitable distribution of burdens and or benefits on our programming. And I know that there was a discussion about, since we already do the Cuyahoga County performance, again, we're trying to maximize the resources, which is time and labor. And so we're already doing reports on our performance, but we were looking at trying to disaggregate that and work with innovation and performance. So we probably need to bring that back up so we can start revisiting what are the key performance measures that agencies have already determined based on our goals of thriving and in different categories, and then we could look at those, see if we can disaggregate that data, and if there's any gaps, and figure from there, what's the picture of what we have? So that's the first thing, is trying to get the baseline information, and I'm not sure how that impacts you all as far as your areas and the data that's on there.
You and I had
Sorry, Jesse, you might need to put your mic on.
I'm sorry. You and I had a discussion about demographic data, and we're in the process of putting that together. I think just as an observation, I think that we can probably attach some metrics to that and goals to that, and determine how we want to advance to those goals. Necessarily with employment, sometimes if sometimes it means that we have to qualify people before they can advance. So I think we need to coalesce around a discussion there, so that our organization is more representative of the community.
I have a comment on this topic. I think it's a very big topic, metrics. And I recall from reading the report that was submitted, that there was quite a variety in the way that departments reported on metrics. Some were very outwardly focused on programs and services, and some were inwardly focused on their progress as a department in this area. So I would like to see, unless there's strong disagreement, I would like to see there be some parameters set for what is expected of departments on metrics. Are we looking, because I know when we've talked about it internally, at least Alex and I, we're looking at the demographics of our staff, obviously, that's one. And then there are probably other internally focused metrics that you can look at. But then we also want to look at our services and our programs through, the external lens. So I guess my point is that we make sure that we're looking at both ourselves as an organization and what we're doing in the community. And again, the reason I bring that up is because, and I know it was our first report, I saw that there was sort of variety across the department. So I think that we should just make sure we establish what the guidelines are on that.
As director of a small department, it's challenging to think about setting goals for internal equity without reference to the larger county. Not that we shouldn't be striving to have equitable compensation within one department, but also being mindful that we encourage staff to think about extending their careers throughout county government, not just one department. So I, as person whose day-to-day work is in a small department, I would value the ability to participate and see how we're doing countywide in terms of pay equity, opportunities to advance, and so forth, and would support Jesse and all others in doing that work.
Yeah, and maybe I didn't articulate it as fully as I could have, but from my department's perspective, it's organization-wide.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we may have to look at it down the road as different pockets, perhaps, or perhaps deal with some department individually. But
Yeah.
but from my perspective, it's absolutely countywide.
Sure.
Right.
I think that's the only way we can really start.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to tuition reimbursement, that's what it was aimed at. It was aimed at as a countywide program.
Right.
I haven't seen the demographics,
Mm-hmm.
but my sense of the demographics will show that we are not represented. We are not currently representative of the county population as a whole. And I think that should be, at least from my perspective, the organization should be reflective of the constituencies that we serve. And I think that's for me, that's goal. That's a primary goal.
And I think that was also similar dilemma formerly as OPD, because again, smaller department. While there were some things internally, as far as internal HR components, obviously we work with HR, and in general, as a small department, we didn't have the other layer of union representation, but we are part of the fiscal officer, which does have that extra layer. So there were things with us, and we're able to somewhat, as far as you talked about the progression, the opportunity, the development of internal employees so that they are broad capability for all to be available, like for instance, with different committees, sharing of information, sharing of opportunities for training, things of that sort internally. But again, we're a small pocket and want to be consistent with the overarching. But it's, so I guess that is one key point, because most departments, obviously, we have the internal component, which is our employees, how we operate within the budget, the training within the budget, access to different, I mean, at one point, not necessarily equity as far as race and gender,
Mhm.
there was the funding opportunity where, hey, if, we're as, for instance, OPD as an internal service department, we don't really have grants or, a significant amount of funding that's available for training. So again, so there's overarching things. So there is that goal of, if smaller departments are gonna be counted and working with HR under the overarching umbrella, obviously as HR
Mhm.
for training, no, well, not training, but pay equity, but even you have the training component, things of that sort. So there is, but the department also has the external, because every department here is to provide a service to our constituents and tax base, and clients. So we definitely have programs and policies on how we determine what projects, what contracts, what, emergency equipment we buy, where do we deploy our resources, that we can analyze that data to look at, externally how we're impacting our clients, the people who we're here for to service the county. But then we also, with that internal focus, we could probably have maybe with that, a next level of how smaller departments and or larger departments can make sure we're leveraging our resources
Mhm.
with HR when it deals with employees, overarching areas.
Well, as a representative from a larger department, and I think probably the largest department, you know, I think we have different problems. And I would say we also have better assets in some ways, or different assets. Definitely, there is enormous disproportionality in the clients we serve. And so although I would say that we more closely align as a body with the populations we serve, we are primarily we're a majority minority female workforce. I think that is what I understand to be the case. And that is much of the population that we serve. I don't know that that matches the county, nor if it should. And I think if we're going to address the problems of racism and economic injustice in our programs and services, our staff have to be very aware and focused on that. I do think we have a great workforce. I worry that our leadership does not match that, and so it's a separate problem.
Yes.
And so even if we have the census in the direct service staff and maybe even the supervisor staff, I think as you move through the organization, we probably don't.
Okay.
So I think we have work to do. But I also just have to recognize one additional challenge that we have to put on the table, and we have to be quite frank about, is we are in a very difficult workforce environment right now. As I sit next to the Director of Human Resources, where we have a tremendous amount of vacancies in our social service staff, and we're very much struggling to bring people on. And I would say is becoming a critical issue for us. And if we're unable to have staff, we're unable to do services, we close programs, or we overburden staff, and we run the risk of burning people out and exacerbating the problem. So I think there's an element of this that we think we should be working on with an eye towards equity and inclusion in hiring. I think there's also, to be blunt, an element of desperation that we need good candidates, as many of them as possible. Anyone watching, if you want to be a social service worker or a corrections officer, please apply. These are good jobs, and they're getting better.
Or an emergency call taker at CPAC.
Okay, those two.
Same situation.
And yet, so we need candidates, we need employees, even though we also know that we need to have them be the right employees with the right values and vision.
So just to make a comment on what Commissioner Merriman said, all this happening in what could be called a universal labor shortage.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not as if one particular job classification is short. We're seeing this almost across the board in a vast majority of job classifications. And just publicly, I'd like to just thank my talent acquisition manager, Julie McNulty, for the job that she's doing on some very, very difficult circumstances. But, and as you know, Director Merriman, that we're meeting this afternoon to talk about that, and we've had a whole number of meetings with the sheriff's office on it also. But yet, that having been said, I think it provides opportunities for us to reach out to sectors of the community, to give them a foothold in employment, and promotional opportunities that the county has. So I think, and we have done everything except send the county executive, to the street with a sandwich board for job openings. It gives us an opportunity of reaching out into the community and trying to bring people in, which my employment staff has been doing, which I think acts in concert with a lot of the other programs that are being run for the community.
So I
There
think
we are.
we're at the risk of being in too deep into a tangent. I do think the connection here is that the item in front of us, equity data and metrics, determine where we are. I think some part of this discussion is, as an organization, where are we? And I don't know if we have the ability to really speak to that in terms of who is, what our workforce looks like, and at what level of the organization. And I'd like to put that out there as an item for consideration, maybe something we submit to the working group. Is this something that we want to really formally explore and really have some more analysis as to, where are we as a workforce? I think same sort of question though for clients and partners.
Right.
And do we want those same questions to be asked and to try to answer? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, very much so. Very
And-
much so.
And I hope this labor market will open up opportunities for individuals that may not have had access in the past. So I think there could be some silver linings. And I think if we start to track that now and we make a commitment to utilizing them or leveraging them, we could also see, potentially, a change in our culture that would be very
Yes,
beneficial.
as we've tried to start to do.
That's right. So Lenore, as you've presented this and you've framed this very well, I just want to confirm with you, is it acceptable for us to ask the working group to really start to look at these 3 points of where we are, where we want to be, where we need to go, and determine how we're going to get there and track our progress? I think the frame that I presented or we've discussed is this is a lot about staff. It's also about clients and the populations we serve and the providers we have.
Right.
Is that the right framing?
Yes, and definitely along the lines with Lindy. I'm so used to Commissioner Burt. But basically, some type of standardization, but relying on the flexibility. And I think the working group is a good source because it has representation from the different departments that can provide that, the niche for their area. So that when, again, like most things, when you do one size fits all, it doesn't fit everyone well. So we want to find something that can be tailored and flexible so that we get the information that can help us start putting in structure or changes or asking the questions on how we can go from where we are, figure out where we believe we should be based on demographics, what's available, the population that we're trying to serve, and the benefits, and if there's any disproportionality or disparities on who's getting successfully through the programs or policies and procedures that we have, and also if there's any undue burdens, like for instance, I'll go back with procurement and diversity, there was sometimes the efficiency for all becomes a hardship for a small business.
Yeah.
So again, we got to look at how we leverage county resources, but sometimes because we want to do a longer road project, because that's one contract, that reduces opportunities for small and minority businesses to participate. But at the same time, while we're trying to maximize the leverage of county tax funds, larger projects have you maximize your resources, your value per dollar. So there's always going to be a potential trade-off.
True.
And we just have to make sure we're aware and that we maximize the benefit in both areas, efficiency and the impact on the community.
So is the request of the working group going to be to explore and identify the metrics? Is that what we're asking them to do, or a few key metrics? Is that,
I think we
Their
should maybe
mission-
explore common metrics,
okay?
but also they
The
can't
the-
take the responsibility from individual departments who are going to be experts at their area.
Yeah, we're each going to have some, I understand each department is
Yes.
going to have some different ones. But will there be a common metric or a few metrics that will be asked of all departments? Or I know HR is looking at certain, but what,
For programming, it may not be common, but there may
No,
be a
programming
structure of
won't be.
how to analyze those
sure,
tools.
okay, good point.
And then they're
Yep.
overarching, for instance, we're still, while we haven't made as much progress as you all already with the tuition and the RFQ for the small businesses, we are still progressing with training, evaluating the RFP for the training. That will be a universal under the county executive authority, and if other entities want to participate. So there are some overarching where there could be standardization, so that would be the request. I guess it's twofold. Where there can be standardization, because there's overarching common equity issues and/or topics, have standard there so we can all be speaking apples to apples, oranges to oranges. But then where there's program and policies, procedures, where we still want to be equitable, we want to have a standard process or some type of template of how we go about evaluating our programs and policies to ascertain, are there some disparities or disproportionate impacts that we want to change or have a further down along the road? Okay. The other point is that I think it's important that we do milestones. That doesn't mean that we do not want the ultimate goal, but a lot of these ultimate goals take time, and there's a lot of phases in that process where you still may not see a changing of the needle, a movement of the needle at the ultimate goal, but there is progress being made. And I'll give one example that pains me. We had 2 contracts that were recently approved at county council. They met the requirements of our programs, but this is why, because when you do a disparity study, you look at what changes you've made, what's the impact, and then if there's justification for further enhancements of that program. So it's progressive. So the 2 contracts that went through will not move the needle in 5 years for this year when we talk about minority participation, although they complied with the requirements that were available under the current policies and procedures. However, because of the changes that we're implementing, those 2 contracts a year from now will have different criteria.
Okay.
So again, ultimately, the end of the year, the number looks the same. And in that case, there was compliance with the program. There were goals set, the vendor complied, but as you know, when you deal with human life, you can provide the parameters, and a person may study and still not pass the test, or there still may be opportunities that may not result in the ultimate goal. Similarly, with all the initiatives that we're doing, you can do the work and not get the ultimate result, but there's progress along the way that's taking place. So while you want to have data, you still have to be able to be intimate about your programming to know if there's still progress.
I think that's what's valuable for us to have access to the working group, the subject content experts, to really get to the specifics. Why is that the case? What is going on? And to empower them to work together to begin to assess that and bring back recommendations for us.
But I think,
Right.
Jesse, I think you need your mic.
I think we need to take the first step first and have them recommend to us how we should move forward on this. And what's
Okay.
the context of in what context will the information that they receive be put into? Sorry for my syntax. So I think what we probably should discuss right here and now is what charge are we going to give them going forward? And what do we want from them at our next meeting?
So I think that's right. That's right. I would have to admit that as I sit here and I think about the report that we all produced at the end of last year, I can't picture how we anticipated this and don't remember what we discussed in that report. But that is our report, and it's what we would say with this year, and I think there are components of the report that speak specifically to this and this next step. And I would say for discussion, does it make sense for us to first consult the report, go back and see, so what did we say? What did we say we were gonna do and how were we gonna do it? And, we're more than a half year into that report, and we need to be thinking about the next report.
Right.
And we need to pick up the pace and preparing for the next report. So I think maybe it makes sense for us to familiarize ourselves with the commitments that were made, because there are some new folks around the table at this point. And then, I don't think we wait until the September meeting to have this discussion. So I'm not saying we have to stop the discussion right now, but I also would say, we have to know sort of our position and our status with our plan for this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could probably put together a committee of the whole meeting
Okay.
between now and our next formal meeting to start to have discussions about it.
Now, the only thing I would if the committee of the whole meets, then that has to be another public meeting.
It is, yes. Yes.
Because,
Or however we want to do it.
so one potential is that, it sounds that we know that we're in preliminary discussions, so we can reconfirm confirm what's in the report, because I like the idea, revisit the report.
Yeah.
We are close because of the schedule that we approved last, meeting in July. We're looking at an early submission in December. So really, this discussion, in most cases, will have fruit for the next study.
Yeah.
And set us up for what we're working on in 22. So I think that all of us are representing pilot agencies that know what we put in our report and should be working toward those items. And then we can still build upon this work as part of what will be the fruit of next year. So I think we could start with possibly as Lindy and, I keep saying, sorry.
I'm okay with informal.
Okay,
So we're okay with
okay.
Lindy.
All right,
and-
if the chair says it, it's fine by
Okay,
me.
I'm
okay,
okay with,
fine.
I'm okay with it. I don't think we need to.
Okay, and Jesse mentioned
For
about,
the minutes, put in the formal title.
Yeah.
spoke about the charge to the working group. There's one subcommittee that's working on the gear assessment, but there's other opportunities for other committee members to work on what are overarching and what standard data do we want to see. And I know that we've already had a request that I forwarded to Jesse on the HR data as far as demographics in the main staff and leadership. But there also could be how we structure and give assistance for departments to start looking at their services
Mhm.
and how we start developing that tool
That's right.
Right.
of how we want to evaluate what we're doing and getting the base data for that. What are we looking for as far as disaggregated data?
And I would say your work to produce the forecast speaks to the third part, and that's our partners. And how our partners represent the vision that was laid out by the county executive through the executive orders as well as through the proclamation. And so I think we're actually doing some of the how-to, just need some specifics on the goals and the milestones.
So I'd like to kind of call out separately some comment from HHS, because I've run into this in my work with workforce as well. It's not just the county employees, it's the contractors and the employees of the contractors or the vendors, supplier, providers, whatever you call them. It's something I'm increasingly running into as I get into workforce, because I've come to realize from the point of view of the citizen or the resident, they don't know the difference between someone who works for Cuyahoga County, someone who works for Towards Employment, someone who works for some other agency. It's all county. And, when we talk about looking at who our workforce is, we usually just talk about county employees. But David, you raised the point, and I've heard this from Brickner as well over in OMJ, Ohio Means Jobs, that we also look at who actually works for the vendors. What's their leadership? Does that represent the community? And in many cases, it doesn't. And from the point of view of interaction with the vendors, I think that's another important point. It's also more challenging because whereas we have some control over who works for the county, we have less control over who works for the vendors, and we also have a lag time. If we don't put it in an RFP, we can't reward it. And RFPs take forever. For example, tomorrow, David and I are both spending a day with the Workforce Development Board. And one of the topics is they've got a big RFP coming out. So if that RFP is going to say anything about the composition of the workforce of the vendors, it has to be decided like now.
That's right,
Good point.
that's right.
So my point is, in the charge to the work group, we need to at least consider, are we asking the work group to recommend ways to measure the representation of those who work for our providers and vendors, as well as our own employees?
And, well,
So just, I think it's a great point, and I just think we'd want to get some detail. Is it the programs that serve our clients, or is it the organization itself?
Yeah.
Because I think there's some value in both. I think if an organization has really made it a priority, but just at the program level,
Right.
but as the client visits the agency, they see or feel something very differently. That may not be what we're looking for, even though that broader agency may be out of our direct influence, or at least our direct control, but could be within our influence.
and those are good points. I know HHS has been having a committee on their RFP process for REI, and they've invited myself and Edwin, and we've been participating, and that's one of the components, but it is part of the RFP, that they're looking at language that's going to ask the vendors to submit information on their org structure, demographics. And also, we were using, and I think, David, you and I had this conversation about a year ago.
Yeah.
About, because we can't set goals for a lot of, if it's a nonprofit or it is a waiver. However, we do have, and this is one of the items that they're pulling, including as part of the RFP potentially for the HHS, is the Cuyahoga County-based Economic Inclusive Program. And part of that is a standard program that the county has. The main benefit currently is that if you're in a bid and you're within 2%, you can match someone based on that designation. The designation requires you to be either demonstrate that you contracted with minority or women-owned businesses within a 2-year period, 2 times over a 3-year period, and or you have a diverse employee structure and you can get certified in that area. So one of the benefits that they're putting, and I think HHS, when you submitted, did your RFP for, was it medical or something? There was, I believe recently HHS did a similar qualification as part of their vendor qualification. Are you CCBEIP or have those demographic equity, basically, seeing if they have a policy or are operating in a manner that's equivalent to our goals. So we do have some draft language, and that's the one thing I would also bring up, is that while we want to be intentional and deliberate about making sure we're at the time with the information that we have, making the best choice that we can. So you want to be, do as much background information, make sure we're trying to be, make good choices. The other thing is that we don't want to delay doing something because we're waiting to have the perfect environment.
I agree.
So
we're trying to balance between doing due diligence, but also making progress.
I agree. I was sort of thinking through that and your points were excellent, Paul, but also about biting off more than we can chew. I feel like we do have a lot to do, and we should incorporate it as we can, but.
And it's a learning, it's a continual learning. So we might try some language, and again, that's why I brought up with the disparity for supplier, it's a progressive. This was thought to work, and for our situation, and those 2 situations I talked about, we're further tweaking so we can see if we can get better opportunities, more opportunities, and more ultimate results at the end.
And I would say in this model that we have, which I think I described as federated, we're each still responsible for our individual organizations. We're still doing this work to the best of our ability with the resources we have in the environments that we have. but then bringing it together to share, to work together, to find those points of intersection. And I know that's a commitment that we've all made. I'm gonna just ask if there are any final thoughts on this as time winds down. I wanna kind of review what we've discussed with the meeting and then also prepare for the next meeting.
I do. Unfortunately, it's new, and it's probably for future discussion, but I just want to lay down a marker that in addition to our own employment and our vendors' employment, there's a whole other world of goals to discuss, which is outcomes. And the game here is to understand our span of control and to set achievable goals for using that span of control to actually influence real-world outcomes that are equity-based, which we all do already. Each of our departments already strives to improve outcomes, but I think that it's an appropriate topic for the county to discuss as part of its equity work, to be able to state over time, what are the county's goals to improve outcomes for its residents and businesses, and how do each of our department's programs work together to advance those goals?
Excellent idea.
I just wanted to reiterate, make sure, also for my own understanding, and that whatever the working group is doing around the topic of metrics, that they touch base with or coordinate with HR to ensure that there's not duplication going on, because it's my understanding, Jesse, that you said you guys are working on some overarching metrics, right, or with regard to our county
Yes.
workforce. So just so that any working group members that get involved in this metrics topic having a solid awareness of what HR is already doing so that they can complement
Yeah.
that and not duplicate it.
Yeah, I think that perhaps that should be part of the discussion at the working group,
Right.
just to make sure that there isn't that duplication. You know, we have a history of different sectors of government going off doing the same thing in
Right.
different arenas, so yeah.
Well, and
Yes,
then-
thank you.
Yeah, and to Paul's point about, we have down here where we are, I think there is a question of what we do. So it is in some ways where we are, what we do, and who we serve. So I feel like there is commonality, and we do share clients and services, but we also work independently. So I think these are issues I'd like to kick to the working group. They are charged with really thinking this through. I'm glad you've added the outcomes to discussion that absolutely should be in there. Any other closing remarks on this section?
So I think some of us, are plainly supporting those efforts,
Yes.
and we may or may not have an impact to the general population. So I think we need to really reserve a spot to show how we're supporting that effort and what organizational changes we're bringing about. It is important. It is absolutely important that we bring changes to the general community, but I think it's just as important that we bring internal changes that facilitate what goes on the outside.
Great. I'm going to move us to closing remarks. Does anyone have closing remarks? Not.
I think we just made them.
All right.
Yeah.
So I do want to bring up one final item that relates more to the discussion about the central surge. There was at least one small business that was recognized at yesterday's event and the need for other events. And I don't think we need to discuss this now, but I do want to put another placeholder out there, is that in this pandemic, we've had many minority-owned businesses come forward and partner with us in ways that we have not been able to do in the past. Some of that is due to the resource, and some of that is due to the need. I do want to put a marker out there that we should be talking about how we capture those relationships, how we identify those small businesses, especially when they're minority-led, and how we engage them and support them in business growth. So I think we heard that last night, and then we heard it because we went to the community, and one of them was there and said, I need help to grow my business. In fact, there were 3 business opportunities, and I'd just like to put a pin in that one, and we can come back to it later. Any other closing comments?
Good discussion.
Yeah, it's
Very
good,
good.
very good discussion. Well, hearing none, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded by Paul and Jesse. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you all.